Every electron is the yawning mouth of a wormhole that leads to quadrillions of higher dimensional universes that are completely beyond rational apprehension. Matter is not lacking in magic. Matter is magic. Well, so then physics, of course, charges forward deeper into matter, asking deeper questions. Well, once you pass below the level of the electron, it's like suddenly, it's like smoking DMT or something. Absolute madness breaks out, where before you had these wonderful theories and they were feeding back this data. Now suddenly you have backward flowing time. You have particles which appear magically on one side of an energy barrier without apparently crossing through it. You have non-locality, which seems to imply that every particle that exists is somehow magically connected with every other particle. We now have quantum teleportation, we have black holes, we have singularities. And don't be fooled, folks. What is a singularity? It's just a place where you agree that the rules are canceled because you don't know what the hell else to do. And it's fine, you know. It used to be in physics that they had one singularity. It was called the Big Bang. And so you say, well, one singularity, essentially what science is saying is give us one free miracle, and then we can run it from there. But the theory of special relativity then introduced the concept of black holes. And of course, black holes are enormous gravitational masses, so massive that neither light nor information can leave them. And what do black holes have at the center of them? Well, a singularity. Well, how many black holes are there in the universe? 10 high 14. That's a lot of singularities if you're trying to produce a theory without singularities. I mean, essentially, that's an admission of total intellectual defeat. My God, if there are 10 high 14 singularities, you're not even doing science. You just might as well be, you know, channeling Atlantis or something. So, it troubles me because I think this stuff is rich, that physics is feeding back, and that ultimately a model of consciousness will come out of studying the deeper levels of the behavior of matter. But the conclusions are all going to support the non-scientific, non-rational factions. In other words, Bell non-locality is real. All matter in the universe is in contact with all other matter through some kind of higher space based on their original connectivity. Quantum teleportation is a possibility. These violations, backward flowing time, and violations of rational casuistry are all real. In other words, science, meaning physics at this point, prosecuted its agenda of deconstructing nature to the point where it let loose the elves of madness, paradox, contradiction, and peculiarity, and that can now never be put back. I mean, the dirty little secret is that at bedrock, the universe is more like a DMT flash than it is like an 18th century garden party, as we were previously assured by the practitioners of science. So I think that's enough rant. ranting on that subject.
So Terence McKenna, he is someone that I have an interesting appreciation for. I don't know how to quite describe the weird relationship, that I have with him as a person and speaker and researcher and writer. I mean, it's unique because on the one hand, just like in that clip that I showed, I find a lot of the things that he has said in various lectures and things, which I find myself listening to sort of in spurts now and then. I come across channels and things that have collections of him, and they're interesting for a number of reasons. Because on the one hand, oftentimes he'll make rather astute observations about things like science and academia and society as a whole and the power structures that are in place in governments. And those observations a lot of times are very witty, done in a very sort of, he's funny. But also, he's really saying something. The scary part about a lot of it is that how much sense certain parts do make to me. But as somebody who is researching so many of the things that he touches upon, but of course he's coming from the complete opposite end of the spectrum in terms of his perspective on God and spirituality and who the entities that he was engaging with really are. So all in all, it makes for a very bizarre sort of example to point to, because of course it's real easy for people to get the wrong idea that you're promoting psychedelics or the occult spirituality, New Age spirituality, which of course is exactly what I am trying to expose. But that's precisely why I think with specific examples and specific individuals, and Terence McKenna is one of them, where because they are so good at articulating a lot of the things that they have come to believe due to all their transcendent psychedelic experiences, and then sort of carrying that torch and being a proponent to the rest of the world and being an advocate for this spirituality. Well, on the one hand, I don't feel bad about saying that I can appreciate that he did have a sense of humor. He did have a keen sense of observation of certain faculties of society and human nature and language and all sorts of things. And I'm not going to take that away from him. I think in many ways he was a very intelligent man, actually, who happened to do a lot of drugs and who was ultimately deceived by very real spiritual entities, demons. And that's the thing, is that I think it provides a touching point to look at some of the things that he says. Just like he can expose the contradictions of things like physics and quantum physics, it gets down to a certain crazy level, and you have to stop and just admit that it stopped being science somewhere back there. Now you really are in the realm of magic and mystery and the metaphysics. He's just saying it. He's coming out and saying it. But here's a clip from a lecture that I think really kind of sums up a lot of what I'm talking about.
In talking about my new book, somebody said that I had gone too far. And I was amused because it implied, from what? It's not like there is a King's X where graybeards in white coats tend the sacred vestal fires of reality. There is no reality. There are only people who know this and people who don't know this and are therefore being manipulated by the people who do know it. This is true, or true enough.
And so I just really loved that little soundbite there, because it actually reflects the mindset that so many people today are embracing. in terms of this idea that there's this quantum reality, there's the magic, quote unquote, the magic, this hidden or occulted truth that basically boils down to the idea that, yeah, there is no such thing as a reality. And some people know this and some people don't. And the people who do are using that knowledge against the people who don't. I mean, that right there just sums up the perspective of, like, what, 2/3 of the truth community? I mean, I don't know how to, I mean, whatever the percentage is, it's a lot of people that basically, like, that's exactly what they think. But that's what just gets me, is the whole irony of that viewpoint is that, I mean, if just think about it, you're saying that there is no reality, but the people who know that there's no reality, i.e. that everything's a construct, that everything's a matrix, that everything is just, that matter is magic, blah, 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 that really it's all about consciousness. It's the consciousness model, right? Everything is just consciousness, but the people who know everything is consciousness are using that against the people who don't know everything is consciousness. But do you not understand what a self-contradictory statement that is? Because to use that against us, it's a self-defeating argument. It's a self-canceling idea. They're using it against, in what way? So the powers that be, the New World Order is using this knowledge of the Matrix, using this knowledge of matter and consciousness being inseparable, right? That all matter is just consciousness. They're using that against us in the real world, but there is no real world, right? So it cuts both ways, if you get what I'm saying. If everything is just consciousness, so you can't actually argue that anything is being done against you, that anything is being done against us, that there is any such thing as evil, that there is any such, because it's not even real. It's all just a construct. It's all just information. It's all just illusion. So now you're mad. So now you're upset against an illusion. It works both ways. It cuts across the whole thing, and this is the whole aspect that most people who are embracing this mentality don't want to admit.
There is a morphological unfoldment occurring on this planet. It is bringing forth some entirely new order of being. We are a privileged part of this. Individually, our hope is to understand and participate in the epiphany. There is no blame. Nothing is off-kilter or wrong or unnatural or artificial. No principle has been betrayed. This is how it is supposed to be. But as it picks up speed, it's going to become more and more frightening as most metaphors fail. And this is why the rise of cults, and why the grasping at ontological straws, and why the whisperings from various corners of the universe have grown to a roar, because we are uncertain. We are not sure.
So hopefully you see what I'm trying to point out here. Like how you can't pick and choose. If everything is just part of the illusion, everything is just part of the matrix, everything is just part of whatever, there isn't stuff that's wrong. And I mean, just what he said right there. There's nothing artificial. There's nothing amiss. Essentially what it boils down to is that it's the rejection of the idea of sin. Okay? That's what all this is. That's what the whole matrix construct, pantheistic quantum mysticism is designed to do, is to find a way of erasing the concept of sin. There's no error. There's no rebellion. There's no trespass against a holy and righteous God. That's what they're after. That is what is driving the whole train. No eternal, external creator God, no sin, no need for forgiveness or salvation, and certainly no judgment. So it's interesting because I also found this piece here that somebody made where it's like an inspirational piece and they added music, right? But it's Terence McKenna talking about the end of the 20th century. He died in the year 2000, but he was talking about the end of the 20th century and all the change that's going on, and using this analogy of giving birth. And it's really interesting because I feel like it really just encapsulates the whole anti-biblical eschatology. It really just boils down to there's two eschatologies. There's really two conceptions of the tumultuous times that we are living in. There's two ways of interpreting it. One in accordance with the Bible, which he references, and then another accordance to this whole panoply of spiritualistic beliefs that are all really one religion at the end of the day. So listen to this.
What is happening here at the end of the 20th century, you see, is a kind of birth process. We, think of the fetal life in the womb. You're endlessly adrift in the amniotic ocean, weightless. Food and oxygen are being delivered without even your awareness through the umbilical cord. It is paradise. And if you were there and you were in control of your fate, you would choose to prolong it forever. But what happens instead is that you get squeezed into the birth canal. Then the paradise turns into hell, strangulation, pressure. You are literally being squeezed to death. To ask the fetus at that point to conceive of the wonderful, satisfying life that it is going to have 40 years hence as a stockbroker living in Bel Air and collecting minor works of Cubist art is ridiculous. Because, that's not where we're at the moment. And so I believe that culturally we are in the birth canal and everything appears to be being destroyed. The oceans, the atmosphere, the very integrity of our own bodies because of all these diseases, ideological contamination, you name it. But we simply must push forward. It's a forward escape. We can never go back, to the game-dotted plains of archaic Africa. That's gone. It's all gone. The only way out is forward. It's called a forward escape. And I'm interested in propagating this notion because, number one, I believe it, and number two, it is a message of hope without which I think people are going to be very challenged because things are going to get worse, apparently much worse. I mean, it would not cause me to break stride if the mess in Bosnia spread until it stretched from the Arctic Circle to Turkey and from Vienna to Vladivostok. I mean, those people are setting themselves up for hell on earth, and we will be dragged into it in some fashion, even if we only have to witness it. So history is turning into a white-knuckle ride, for sure. And without the faith in some kind of transcendental phase transition, I think there's a tendency to despair and to panic and to nihilism. And religion has failed. What religion gives us is what we saw last week in Texas. They can only conceive of phase transition as apocalypse, as Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. That isn't what it is. We are closing distance with the first moments of true human civilization. When people actually do treat each other with respect, when there actually is a place made for the celebration of human differences, when we actually do feel the suffering of the people around us and respond to that. So without psychedelics and the models that they make possible, hope is, I think, a very, very fragile thing. And that's why I take the position that I do, because I think that we are on the brink of the adventure for which we left the trees and left the African plain. But it's not a sure thing. It rests in our hands.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, it comes down to the fact that regardless of what mechanism or means that a person might be putting their faith in, whether it's in a technological sense or they're fully bought into the mainstream system and society and the economics and the government and all that, or whether you're completely standing on the outside of that and pointing to that as being rudimentary to so much of what is going wrong, you can be on both sides of that fence and still both adhering to this basic concept of being in a birth. And this is why the New Age movement is called the New Age, because that is what is foreseen at the end of this whole tumultuous birthing process is, a new birth for humanity, a new level of existence, a new quantum leap in consciousness, a new stage in evolution. And even though guys like Terence McKenna balked at the label, he perceived himself as being against the New Age, against New Age spirituality, because he said it was, quote, because it's too mired in dogma, quote unquote. And he's such a fan of sort of this idea that we don't even know anything, or we know so little, we just know a shadow of truth and all this stuff. We're like termites thinking we can map out the cosmos and such. But there is dogma nonetheless. The dogma is, that's the one common denominator, is the rejection of the idea of sin. You're dogmatically against the idea that sin is real, that there is a God who will judge. That's apocalyptic. That's Armageddon. So that's really the enemy at the end of the day to everyone who embraces some form of this eschatological view, this New Age view. It's why it really does all fall under one big umbrella. And some people might be fans of transhumanism and getting chipped and getting plugged into the quantum computer matrix or whatever, and then you have people who would reject that outright and want to go live in the Amazon and be one with the rainforest and get back to nature and have completely divergent views on all sorts of things, but at the same time be united in the rejection of the closed-minded religious fundamentalists, Armageddon types. The people who insist that God is coming back and that Jesus is going to judge everyone at the great white throne judgment. And I mean that's really where the line is drawn, I think. And so, you can have discussions about exploring things like cosmology or the power structures on Earth, the New World Order, or the media and economic, on and on and on. But at the end of the day, this is sort of the ultimate demarcation line that you're going to have to come to. It's one side or the other. Either as things get more intense and as things get more crazy and painful, you're either going to view it as the signs of the end that was prophesied by Jesus himself and the revelation given to the Apostle John in the book of Revelation. Or you're going to see it as just humanity trying to give birth to, trying to shed off all the crap that had accumulated somehow in the previous centuries and trying to give birth to a new eon, a new era, a new age of hope and peace and prosperity that we've defined for ourselves. And that's Luciferianism. And there's really just one or the other. And that's why I find this kind of material and figures such as McKenna to be useful in this conversation, because it just brings that to the forefront. He's getting his ideas and his worldview straight from entities. He's telling you that these are real entities. They're not, they're not archetypes of his subconscious or figments of his imagination. These are real intelligent entities that are out there somewhere. And he's right about that much. He was just completely wrong about who they are and what they're really all about, just like millions of people today who are engaging with the demonic realm, engaging with advanced entities who they think are aliens or interdimensional, spirit masters, ascended masters, whatever else. And they are listening to these lying voices and being led astray and being led straight to the gates of hell. And all I hope at the end of the day is for more people to see through the deception, see through the lies. Thanks.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me." Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what word's footing set? Or who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together, and all the angels shouted for joy? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment, and I wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it, and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, "This far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt." Have you ever given orders to the morning, or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it? The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. The wicked are denied their light, and their upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. What is the way to the abode of light, and where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the paths to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you were already born, you've lived so many years. Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain, a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no man lives, a desert with no one in it, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass? Does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen? Can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons? Or lead out the bear with its cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you, "Here we are"? Who endowed the heart with wisdom, or gave understanding to the mind? Who has the wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of the heavens when the dust becomes hard and the clods of earth stick together?